let's get started. So, I promise today's the last time you're ever going to see Toytail. Promise. I didn't realize that by choosing to continue to do Toytail, that we were going to do a whole other week of Toytail. My planning this week just wasn't the best, and I apologize as far as lectures go. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen right now and getting everything situated. So today we're going to be working on routing, and sorry for the loud banging construction outside. At the end of yesterday's lecture, we talked about how to utilize this kind of state here to toggle between either viewing the form or viewing toys, right? And today we're going to talk about how to implement that simply with visiting a URL so that maybe we can just kind of have like a home page. I mean, we'll just make a really like a dummy home component. And then it says, hey, click here to view the toys and click here to view the form. Okay. Today we're going to be using a node package called React Router. Like I said, the documentation is confusing. I hope today to give you the most straightforward answers that you can use so that you're not getting too lost in this. I think everything that I teach you today should be sufficient enough for you to know. Okay? So, what we can do here is, let's see. So here's the quick start in the documentation. And what you first need to do is npm install React Router DOM. So I've already done this in my project. So after you create a React app, right, and get inside of it, you want to npm install React Router DOM. And then they're kind of doing this all in one file, right? And our files are a little bit more split up. So I'll talk about how to do this. On the top level, what we're going to do is we are going to import browser router from that package, React Router DOM. And it's very common because this name is so long to import it as a different name, which I don't know if you guys knew this, but you can use the word as to import a value as something else. You can rename it, right? Remember that default export values can already always be renamed, right? Simply by changing the name in which you import it from. Remember, this only works for default exports, right? When we're importing them. But when we are importing what is not a default export, we can change the name by saying as. So it's very common. I even think that they do it in here. Browser router, as router. Browser router is just really long. They do have a router component. Again, this contributes to the confusion. They recommend not using it because there are other ones that you can use. In this case, we're using browser router. So browser router as router from React Router DOM. And then what we want to do is we want to wrap our entire app component, inside of this browser router. So this is what's called a higher order component, similar to a higher order function. Think about it this way. Imagine we have let's imagine that we have a function that takes in, two numbers and then returns the multiplication of those two numbers, right? And then imagine we have another function that takes in that function and executes it and passes it in the two numbers that it wants to invoke, right? So 2 times 4 equals 8, right? This is called a higher order function because it takes in another function and gives it information, right? This is a very, very, very kind of low level example, right? we can imagine that router is a component that accepts a child component, in this case, our entire app, right? And passes it in arguments that enhance it, okay? That's kind of just what's going on here. So higher order component. Definitely a concept that you should write a blog about if you don't understand very well. I think that the curriculum goes into it a little bit, but this is very common. So remember that again in React syntax, whenever we have children as whenever we have children in components, those children actually just get passed in as arguments. So the syntax looks like we are creating, like this, right? But what's actually happening is we're making a new instance of router and we're passing it an instance of app. Okay, that's all that's happening. The children components get passed in as arguments to the parent components or the higher order components. Okay? Very key kind of topic to understand on a lower level of what's happening, but obviously when we write it out, it's going to be like this. Does everybody kind of understand the general concept of what a higher order component is? A component that takes in another component as an argument, and by taking it in, right, passes it properties. It's so loud outside, I'm so sorry. And passes them properties, right? And then those properties can be used by that component that was taken in as an argument to be used in the future. Okay. All right, so now that we've done this, this is really good. This is great. This is going to give our app component some powers here. So inside of our app down here, mainly what's kind of going on is we will talk more about kind of what's getting passed in here in a second. So let's go inside of our app.js, and right now I'm just using this really dinky favorite word state to kind of manage whether I'm viewing the form or whether I'm viewing the toys. I'm really sorry about the banging. Every room in my apartment has a window, so there's no escaping the noise. Right, so the goal here is to now say, okay, we'll have a button to go to localhost 3000/1/form or localhost 3000/toys and see one or the other, right? And then have buttons that redirect in that appropriate manner, right? So let's just get the kind of routing up first. We can get the links and the buttons in later, but we want to get the routing to match. So when someone's visiting /forms, right, they'll see the forms. And when someone's seeing toys, they'll see the toys. So what we're going to do is we're going to start importing a bunch of things from the React Router DOM. Did I import it correctly here? Yeah, React Router DOM. Import, we're going to import route first from React Router DOM. And I think this is going to get the point across primarily. So let me hide this for now. Oh yeah, that doesn't work. You have to do this, and then you have to do HTML comments. It's okay. I'll just move it up here. And now we have these two components that we want to render, but we want to render them depending on, right, depending on what route is being viewed at a given time. So the principal way of doing this is by taking this route component, another higher order component, and simply wrapping it like this. But then we want to specify in here the path that the user should be visiting in the browser in order for someone to see this component. So I'll say path, and then I'll say, okay, toys. Okay, if I do this, oh, sorry, it should be route. not router, route. Look, it's disappeared because we're not viewing the toys route. But if I go to /toys, it is there. Okay. The form is still down here though, because we haven't really, right? We haven't really kind of given a condition for this. So if we go back, we don't see the toys container. Route path for form should render the form. And that's disappeared too. So if I go to /form, I see the form. And if I go to /toys, I see the toys. Simple enough. Okay. So let's finally make use of this header, right? This header that we created that has just an image in it. And inside of here, we will put links to say, hey, see the toys or see the form, right? Or go home. I'll add like a really simple home component that just says, welcome to toys or whatever. Welcome to Toytail. So in order to kind of get links to work, React Router has a higher order component called, or I think this is just a regular component called link from React Router DOM. And when we import link from React Router DOM, we can make some links here. We say link to, and then we'll say /form, and then we put a value here of we'll say go to form maybe. Let's see, is this gonna give me what I want? Oh, it's all the way up there. I can make it a button, I believe. And that's gonna reroute me to the form. Why doesn't it do a line break on the image? I wonder if it's because my I don't want it to be blocked. There we go. Oh shoot. Oh, that's pretty ugly, but we're not here to learn about styling. Okay, and then I'll make another one for the toys. Go to toys. There we go. And then I'll make another one for home. Go home. And then in my app.js, I will create a route path home that really is just a div that says, welcome to Toytail. Okay. Super simple, right? Any questions so far? All right, so let's make this more complicated. It's too easy to be true, right? So the thing about the thing about route is that any path that somewhat matches this a little bit is going to pass. So if I go home, but I also maybe go /home/ something else, this is still going to work, right? It's not quite precise. It's kind of saying, oh, home, it matches, it works, right? That's going to give us, kind of what we want. So if I said something like, if all of these started with home, for example, and had something else, Let's see. Nope. Should it be lowercase? Is that why? Or maybe not, maybe not. Hold on. I just made an example of this a second ago. Okay, look, all of these kind of have home. I can't think of a great example. They're all here though. I guess that's kind of the point, right? So if we use route, we can kind of say I can't honestly think of a good situation of when you would want to do this. I think it's a little messy, but you can basically say, you can make the route a little loose, and then if you want to add something on it in the future, right? Or if you want to say, again, like home / something else, all of these are going to show up even though they have that extra, it has that extra bit of the URL at the end, right? So in order to kind of prevent this from happening, we want to add the keyword exact. It means only show me this page if the route is exactly home, or if it is exactly form, or if it is exactly toys. Okay. Any questions so far? The other kind of alternative to this that you'll often see as well is this switch, which I also need to go in and import when I get a second. And what switch is going to do is it will, please don't start with me. What it's also going to do is it's going to say, okay, I'm going to only show the first route that matches the path closest, right? So if I had, yeah, I don't know why I can't think of a good example of this. If I had like toy, I know this is all incorrect. Toys / home, toys / form, I don't know, something like this. And I put in toys, it's going to match the first one. Even if I do /toys / home, it's still not even going to get that far because we're not using exact path here, right? So it's this combination of route not having the word exact in it, so being a little bit loose, and switch going with the first one that matches, right? So if I wanted my switch to, only go to the exact path of something like this, then, it's going to skip over this one and it's going to go to toys / home, even though, toys / home. Yeah. That's what we wanted. What I'm basically saying is you can kind of just use, you don't have to use switch, you can use exact path for basically most things. Using both of them together, you might find a reason to do it. I don't know, depending on how your app works. But if you just use this route situation here, and as long as your paths are exact, oh, now my keyboard's acting up. Probably going to be fine. Oh, I need to change this to toys and to form. Okay. Any questions so far? All right, so we've got links, we've got routes. There's this other kind of interesting aspect that maybe you guys haven't thought about yet. So let's go bring back Forky. What a scary creature. Sure, this one is fine. It's gonna be a really basic one. Okay. Let's go add Forky, right? I want to add Forky. Here's his URL. I'm going to click make a new toy. What do we expect to happen? What do we expect to happen after we've submitted a toy? What would you expect to happen if you were using this website? Great. We should go back to the toy container page. Is Forky there? Yeah, he is. Or just the toy itself. Let's do both of those, okay? Let's just get the form to send to take us to Forky, okay, when we're done submitting. So here's the part that I was researching because it's very unclear in the documentation, because it tells you, hey, this is the way that you should write your routes. That's what it says. And it says, don't do it this way, the way that I'm about to show you, but it doesn't give me any alternatives for the way that I'm trying to show you. So I'm going to show you the way that I think we should do it. So there are a couple arguments. Here's the stuff that Router is really kind of taking care of at the level of index.js, right? When we created, I don't know where, index.js right here. You can get rid of a lot of these. In index.js, when we wrapped this router, what the router is doing is it's keeping track of a couple of things. It's keeping track of the URLs, the history of our application, and I think there's one more thing, but I can't think of it right now. So there are three things in particular that Router is kind of keeping track of that might be helpful for us to use later. And we're about to use one of these right now. So I want to have the power to be able to reroute my application once a user has finished submitting a form, okay? And by doing that, what we want to do is we want to add we want to manually add a new route to the history of the routes that we visited, because what React is doing is it's syncing itself up with the most recent route visited in the history. Okay. So in order to kind of, so there's a history object that Router is using, and we want to be able to pass that object to our form so that we can manually add another route for it to go to, right? Because I don't want a user like clicking a button. I can't really have this be a link here, right? There are other things that it has to do. So it's not necessarily, we can't really use the link to, right? We need to kind of create we need to create an instance. So what we really need to do is just have access to the history object and update it so that our application will change. And in order to get access to the history object, we have to use an alternative way of writing this route, okay? And the alternative way of writing this route is by using this second prop to this route component called render. You can also use one called component. Again, I don't really know the difference. They both work. Let me see if I can find something really quickly in here. Routes. So over here it says the route component is perhaps the most important component in React Router to understand and use it. Route render methods. The recommended method of rendering something with a route is to use children elements as shown above, which is what we were doing here. Child elements, right? There are, however, a few other methods you can use to render something with a route. These are provided mostly for supporting apps that were built with early versions of the router before hooks were introduced. Well, I don't really know what that means. So component and render, route, component render. And thanks for taking me to a video, terrible documentation. Okay, here, I guess component. A React component to render only when the location matches. It will be rendered with the route props. What are the route props? Don't send me to a video. I want to know what the route props are. Very frustrating. Oh, I guess these are the route props. Okay, so the problem here, though, is that when you pass in a, oh yeah, here's the difference. When you pass in a component to render, you can't pass in any props to it. If you want to pass props to it, you have to use the render function and pass props in. So if I wanted to say component, I would have to say component and toys container, but I would not be allowed to pass in any props. So if I need to pass in props, I need to use the render method, which is just a callback function that returns the component with the props that I passed in. Obviously, there is a reason why we're doing it this way, because what we have access to here is what are called router props. And the router props have that history object that we need, okay? So this is still doing higher order component stuff. And again, I don't understand why this is basically higher order component stuff. So I don't know why I don't have access to this when I'm inside of this component itself. For example, if I go into the form right now and I ask the form to show me what the props are for this form, and I just realized that I am not, I'm not doing this on the right component. It should be, this component. So the toys can go back to being a normal component if we want. This is the one that we want to use the render prop for. So again, I'm confused because we should just see these things as props, but we don't. We have to add them in manually. I don't understand why. Router props go here, and then we need to add them. So I'll say router prop, and then I think it's just like this actually. Router props. There we go. And now I have access to history, location, and match. So match is telling us a little bit about information in our URL. We'll get to match in a second. Location is just giving me the current path name. I don't really use location. I haven't really used location. And history is, so far we've navigated 33 times on our application. And it's keeping track of how many times. So here, this is the object that we want to contribute to, that we want to add something to, right? So that we can navigate away from this page once we've successfully created a toy. So again, I'm not using this child syntax anymore. I am now having a self-closing route component that has a second prop of render, which points to a callback function. Just like setState, for example, right? This is just a function that's going to get past router props, and then we want to spread those router props as props to our form component. So that inside of our form component, when I say this.props, I now have these bonus props that have to do with the history of the routing of my application. And then what I'm going to do is when I'm done working, or when I've completely submitted my component, or my, oh, you know what? I guess something else I didn't think about is that we could also do it here at this level, right? That's okay. I like doing it over here. That's fine. It's good practice for if you need to do this in the future. Okay, so then after I've submitted the input, right, and I have made a new toy. Oh, sorry, it should be down here, not in the handle input. Make a new toy. Maybe I can make a callback function. I can say this.props.add new toy, and then I can say this.props.history.push, contributing to the history, and now I want to go to the toys container, so to slash toys. Okay. Line 27. Accepted an assignment or function call and it's an expression. Oh, there we go. So now if I say forky, oops. I should be, oh, cannot read property name of undefined. And choice container JS12. What do you mean he's undefined? What did I do? I think I did something down here. What did I do? Forky's there. What happened? Go to form, forky. Oh, probably because this props to add new toy. I think it was because I was getting the toy object back. So I just need to take the response and then pass the response in here. There we go. Okay. I wasn't doing pessimistic rendering here. I was doing optimistic rendering, right? There we go. Okay. Great. Any questions so far? Delete forky. Delete forky again. We get an automatic redirect once the form has been submitted. It looks like for a split second we see the home page. Did anyone else see that? No, that was just me being crazy. Okay. All right. So this last part is going to be weird. Okay. We want to just show one toy at a time when someone visits them, right? And we can basically tie that to their IDs, right? So we should be able to say toys/1 and see, you know, Woody or whoever, for example, right? I like this idea. I think it's good. So if we were to put this inside of our router here, we could say something like route exact path equals / toys. And then how did we do slugs in Rails? Does anyone remember? Yep, /ID. And then what we can basically kind of do is say something like, maybe this won't be, let's see, this might be, I can't yet tell if this is gonna be tricky or not. What I want to do is I can basically render the toy component for this toy. Kind of like, might be able to do something like this. Let's see, we can say this.state.toys.find. Okay. I wish there was something like a map and a find at the same time, find one thing and transform it. Maybe I'll break this out into its own method then. Find and create single toy. Oh, no. This isn't gonna work. This isn't gonna work. Route exact path toys. Okay, so the problem here is that we don't know the ID until someone visits the page, right? So what we have to do is we have to do this rendering one more time, like we did. And we need to say, shoot, why is this confusing? Let's see. I thought that I knew how to do this. I do, but I'm confused about the exact way to do it. All right, give me a second. I have to do some research. Of course. Okay. So normally what we would do is obviously the version of our application is a little, right? Usually what we would do, usually these cards here would just be slight previews, right, of the information that we want. And usually clicking on one would give us like a huge list of information, right? But because I'm just trying to preserve the kind of use here of the same component, we're going to do something, let's see. We're going to do something maybe slightly different. All right, no, you know what? Why don't we just why don't we just do that? Why don't we make a new page just to show a single. No, you know what? I'm gonna reuse this. I'm gonna try. There are two ways we could do it. We could basically make a new component for like a more expanded view of a toy, right? I don't know, it would be kind of silly to do what we're about to do, which is just keep the same component, but I just kind of, I don't know, it's gonna be a little bit tricky, but I think we can figure it out together. So I'm also gonna need these router props again. And what I'm gonna need to do is to render a toy card. But the props that I pass it in are gonna be a little bit different. First of all, we want the router props, right? And then I'm gonna pass it all the toys. And then I'm gonna say, no, this is a bad idea, isn't it? This is a bad idea. Okay, I'm just gonna make a new component. Toy show.js, import React from React. It's just gonna be a function. Toy show. I'm not going to need state or anything. And then we'll return right now just a div. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import this from that component. And then down here, I'm going to say render toy show. I'm going to pass in the router props. I'm going to pass in all the toys, this .state.toys. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, and then I got to close this. Okay. So when someone goes to /toys/1, let's see. Toy show is not returning anything. Oh, right. Test. I didn't put anything in here. Okay. Toys/1, toys2, toys3, etc. This is kind of the goal here, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to receive these props. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the toy equal props.toy or all toys.find. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the, and let me console log in here so you can kind of see what we're working with. Props.
Chris, is this just a presentational component that you're creating?
Yes.
Cool.
When you say presentational, what do you think classifies a presentational component?
Well, I don't see any class for one, so it's not a class component. And for two, I don't remember ever seeing props being passed in inside of that top function. So I'm just assuming that it's simply just presenting information, not manipulating it.
But I want you to be careful about, yes, all components can receive props. It doesn't matter if it's a class or a function.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want you to think that presentational is simultaneous or is equivalent to stateless. I think that the presentational and container components are helpful when thinking about yes, this is containing an uncertain amount of other things, but those presentational components might also need state and might also need something within themselves as well. So don't think that a presentational component can't have state. It can.
Okay.
Okay.
And by state, you don't mean that.
What?
You don't mean by state. You don't just mean that it's accepting the state of the parent. You mean that it can have its own state.
Receiving state from the parent is receiving props.
As props, yeah.
So any component that receives props, right? State isn't the only thing you can pass down as props. You can pass down several things as props.
Mm-hmm.
Usually if you have information in state that you're passing down to props, or that usually you have information in state that, or usually if you have information in state that your child needs, you have to pass it down as props, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is a presentational component, right? The toy card, but it's a pure component, right? And it received props.
Right.
And who knows, maybe we want to change the colors of the card from red to black, and that would require it having state, but that doesn't mean that it's not presentational.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I'm inside of my toy show because I've written the route that's viewing the toy show. And I've received all of the toys, right? And I have my history, my location, and my match. Inside of the match here, we have our parameters, just like we would have in React, right? Or in Rails. If someone comes and visits this route in Rails, right, we would look at our params and try to find, you know, the key of ID in the params to figure out which ID the use, what, you know, to try to find what the user was trying to see, right? So because I created a slug, right, an open space inside of the URL that I defined here for a user to type in a dynamic route, right? That bit of information is inside of this match prop, which we need from router props, okay? I see a lot of students frivolously or unnecessarily passing in router props without actually needing history, location, or match. So make sure that you're keeping your code clean by not passing in things that you don't need. All right. So the first thing, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to use that prop to search, to look over all of the toys, props.allToys, and find that toy, right? And I'll ask if the toy's ID. Well, I guess the thing that I should probably do is props.match.params.id. I probably want to, what is it called? Parse the integer, because it's, I want to make it a string, right? Is that how you do it? Percent. No. I think it's toString1. How do you turn something into a string? I'm forgetting. Oh yeah. No, this is fine. Yes, I want to take the string that is the match params ID and turn it into an integer. Oops, I obviously can't do that because I'm not in like a Bible or anything. So props.match.params ID is a string, but I want it to be an integer. And then I'm going to use that integer. I'm going to ask if the toy.id is equal to the ID, right? And then once I've found that toy, then I can say things like name and toy.name. And then I can also maybe, and then, you know, put in an image. src equals toy.image, something like this. And canary property name I'm going to find, let's see. Did I find the toy? Looks like I didn't find the toy. Oh, and that's the other problem too, right? Is that on the first render, there are no toys because on the first render, they have not been fetched yet from the database, right? And then this one also, all toys is not working. Why? Let's see, toys, this dot state dot toys. Toy show this dot state dot toys. Maybe that's even on the second render. So let me try to hide this really quickly. I'll still put test here. It might even be on the third render. Here we go. So unfortunately, it takes 2 renders before this component finally receives toys as props. So we have to add this kind of check here to make sure that we've received a toy at all, right? So then we'll ask ourselves, if toy this isn't working the way that I wanted to. It needs to be JavaScript. So it would be if toy return, here we go. And then we'll say something like, yeah, name, toy.name. And then I'll just really disgustingly put the image URL here. And then we need to otherwise return just an empty div. Okay, so if we go to the toys now, we can make a toy card be a link. And we can say that the link to is going to be to/toys/ come on. And then interpolate this.props.id. And then we'll close the link here. So that when I click on a toy, it takes me to their individual toy page. Okay. So that's really it. I think that just with that information alone, you can get a lot done in your application, right? We have basic routing done with the route exact path, right? We have two ways to do it. If your component doesn't need, and you can actually write all of your routes like this if you want to, right? Nothing is preventing you from writing them all like this as well. If you want. You can kind of, just leave these things blank if you feel like it. That's just to kind of keep everything consistent, right? We learned about the router props. The router props give us access to match, which is going to have information about our route and our slug parameters, if we have any, and access to the history prop if we need to redirect from within a callback function, right? So I use the router prop here, history, to push the new route that I want the user to go to after they've submitted a toy, right? And then in my toy show, our new component, I use the match parameters inside of the props to find the toy, right, that I want to use. Okay. And then render this here. Remember that because the fetch request doesn't happen until component did mount runs, the visiting an exact toys path can run, and we've seen 2 times before. On the 3rd time, it actually has fetched that toy information and been passed down. So we always have to have some sort of waiting return value until we do get props that have all of the toys, right? So keep that in mind. Yeah, I think that's it. Can anybody think of a situation that we didn't go over that they're interested in seeing how one might do? Again, I personally don't think that the documentation is great. You might find better videos on the internet. of how to do some of these things. Their video trainings aren't up to date. I clicked and watched one of these. This one is from 2018, I think, over 2 years old.
I'm going to show you.
So one of the kind of criticisms of React is that it doesn't have its own built-in routing system and that you have to use a third-party routing system. And it's pretty kind of ubiquitous within Flatiron that we all kind of think that the documentation is like not very clear. So to me, if I were you, I would just stick to these things that I showed you. There's a lot. There are 2 other different ways that I can think of how you could get access to the match and history props. You know, I think that they're kind of unnecessary. I think this is just the most straightforward way. But if you want to read more about, you know, when you might want to use a switch or when you might want to avoid using an exact path, you can, you know, read about this stuff here and see if you can find any other examples online. I think, again, like I said, I think this is the most straightforward way. Okay. All right, we're nearing the end and fewer people are coming to lecture. There are 3 more lectures and then you're done. So keep it up. I'm gonna start open office hours now. Feel free to hang out if you want to go over any of the homework that I gave to you all.